Hey guys, how are you doing? This is Rob. Welcome back to the channel, and today I finally want to talk about a story that's been going around for a few weeks, and it has to do with these rumors and theories and speculation on the internet that seems to point to this vague idea of a remake of The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Quickly before I jump into this story, because it is very interesting and I would be very thrilled if there was any sort of validity behind it, I just want to let you know that I'm trying to make a push to cross 25,000 subscribers. I'm hoping it's something I can do in the next few months. So if you are new to the channel or you watch and you have never been subscribed, I hope you consider subscribing after watching this conversation. Now, the Ocarina of Time. What do you say about a game this legendary that has been around for so long? In fact, only a few weeks ago, we finally had the 25-year anniversary of the release of the Ocarina of Time. It is a very famous, popular game. Many people consider it to be the best game ever made, and I think that that is a fair assessment. I wouldn't, put it at my #1 game in my personal list, but when you consider the pantheon and the history of all things gaming and the whole industry and the Zelda franchise, I think there is a case to be made for, at the time of its release, the impact and the quality of the Ocarina of Time was so massively, unfathomably good that maybe you could say at the time it released, it was the best game ever made. Really quickly before I jump into the actual story about the rumors of the remake, I do just want to say that I myself was 18 years old when the Ocarina of Time came out in 1998. And I loved the Nintendo 64. To this day, the 64, I think, is still my favorite console of all time. And so finally playing that first Zelda game in 3D, only 2 years after Mario 64 had blown our minds showing Mario in 3D, Ocarina of Time was just on another level. And it really was a seminal moment or a game-changing moment, at least in my life, as somebody who grew up as a game fan and a Nintendo fan, and somebody who loved the Zelda franchise ever since the first game on the NES. I mean, my memories of Ocarina of Time when it was brand new, they'll be burned into my brain for the rest of my life. Literally on my deathbed, I'll be thinking, man, the Ocarina of Time was so good in 1998. And so it goes down as not only one of my favorite Zelda games of all time, but one of my favorite games ever. And I feel very fortunate that I was kind of at a perfect age to experience it when it released and experience the kind of shift in gaming that the Ocarina of Time represented. Just like I'm jealous of people who were either a young kid or a teenager when the first Star Wars movie came out in 1997, I wouldn't be born for 3 more years. But when that movie came out, kids of a certain age were the perfect age to experience what that movie did and the cultural shift it represented. I unfortunately missed that. But I like to count Ocarina of Time for the gaming world to be kind of a similar moment, and something that, like I said, I just feel fortunate being 18 years old that I and my younger brother and some of my friends were able to kind of just bask in the glory of Ocarina of Time as it released. Which brings us to this story and this rumor about the concept of a remake of that game in an era where remakes are very common, they're very popular, and if I'm being honest, a lot of remakes are extremely high quality, including recent ones. So the idea has merit. It's definitely an interesting idea, but is it something that Nintendo would actually do? Maybe, maybe not. So as far as I can tell from my research, the earliest actual rumors that people started kind of attaching themselves to and believing in regarding a remake of the Ocarina of Time go back a few months ago to when Dr. Sirkin Toto, who is a very famous analyst and well-known analyst on Twitter, he had made a tweet regarding something that some folks understandably perceived as something hinting to a remake game, even though I still think it was a little bit of a stretch, where he just tweeted ZR 2023. And the interpretation was Zelda Remake 2023, because that is very vague. ZR 2023, what does that even mean? And here we are, by the way, now only just over 2 weeks before 2023 is over, and we don't know anything about any kind of Zelda game or Zelda remake. But at the time, a few months ago, I think it was in October, he made that tweet, and some people felt that that meant before the end of the year, when there was still 2 or so months to go, we would see confirmation about some kind of Zelda remake game, and the game everyone assumed it would be was going to be Ocarina of Time. And not that long after that, there's a person who's known, I think on Reddit boards, as some kind of leaker that a lot of people have believed in, and I've covered this person a few times in the past as well. This person's name is Zippo, and there's a lot of controversy that person has gotten into that I will admit I'm not fully up on, because I don't really follow this aspect of the rumor mill. But it's worth pointing out, and even the linked article below that I'm going to share regarding this story also touches on this, where Zippo also claimed, quote, "The hero of time will return in the very near future." And so that combined with the ZR 2023 tweet had a lot of people thinking the hero of time, of course, is a link from Ocarina of Time. And so everyone said they're going to be doing a remake of Ocarina of Time, and that's where that came from. Now, the most recent update to this, if we want to call it that, and something that is a little bit interesting, but I don't know if it really tells us that much of a story, but it's something, is that in IG Aonuma's recent interview with Game Informer, which I also referenced in my last video about the future of Zelda after Tears of the Kingdom, he was actually asked about the idea of this Ocarina of Time remake, and his response was simply no comment. So, you know, do with that information what you will, and of course the internet is doing with that information what they will, and some people are saying that this shows that they're not thinking about it. Other people very obviously think that this means that they are working on it and he just can't say anything about it yet. And I understand that perspective, and I'll fully admit there is a chance Nintendo is considering this, but at this point, 2 weeks before the year is over, the ZR 2023 thing doesn't seem to mean anything, because even if it's not Zelda Remake, what else did that mean? ZR? What else could that possibly be? 2 weeks to go, we don't know anything about that whole tweet. So I think that when you look at all these things, sure, a remake of the Ocarina of Time or some kind of Zelda game is certainly on the table. It's just hard for me to put all of my chips on that just yet. But I will say, I kind of want it. I think that it would be really exciting to see a game that monumental remade in some kind of newer engine, and if they somehow changed up the content or added things to it, that would also be interesting, because a remake can be made in a few different ways. The Resident Evil games are a great example of how you can take some of those older games. Resident Evils 1 through 4 have all been remade, and they've definitely changed and moved some things around to accommodate for a new graphics engine and graphic style and modern technology, and also a way to kind of spice things up for people familiar with the original game and make it kind of fresh in some sections while also balancing staying true to what we expect from the original game. Now, whether or not this is actually a rumor we can believe in, I'm not really ready to say. All I will say is that I'm not personally, like, expecting it like a fact. I don't think that, you know, Circin Toto's tweet and the Zippo thing and even Aonuma's no comment statement really tells us anything for sure. I think it's on the table, like I said, but I'm not ready to say that I believe in it. However, I do think it's worth revisiting the times where Nintendo has remade and re-released games before. And there's a couple of examples that come to mind. As far as true remakes, the first three that jump to my mind is Metroid Zero Mission on the Game Boy Advance, Metroid Samus Returns on the 3DS, and a Zelda remake, Link's Awakening, which was released only a couple of years ago on the Switch in the current generation. And those are examples where they've balanced how true and not true to the original game they're going to be, but they've updated the graphics, upgraded the gameplay, remade the game, changed some things around in the case of the Metroid games, and in the case of the Link's Awakening, to my knowledge, it's fairly faithful with just a really pretty art style. And so they have done that before. And then when we look at this year, I'm going to be honest, man, I look at Metroid Prime Remastered as a very interesting balance between being a remaster, but in some ways, there are remade elements to that game as well. And you guys know, Metroid Prime is my favorite game of all time. Metroid's my favorite series. So the fact that we have 3 Metroid games to look at as a template is very interesting. And I feel like if we apply some kind of balance between the Link's Awakening remake and Metroid Prime Remastered, I could envision a world where Nintendo makes of a new remade version of Ocarina of Time, the Nintendo 64 classic, that strikes a balance between those two games. And to me, not only would I love to play that, I think it would be a huge hit. I mean, nowadays we're remaking Metroid games, we're remaking Dead Space games, we're remaking Final Fantasy VII, and Resident Evil games left and right. There's such a market for this. And again, I think pretty much all of those are very quality. I love the Resident Evil remakes. They're just all fantastic to me. Even the original one on the GameCube, it's actually my favorite of all of the remakes. I haven't played Dead Space Remake yet, but I believe it's fantastic. It looks awesome. And so it's just such a viable thing. And the fact that it's not a trend that Nintendo has been ignoring, as evidenced by the few games I've listed, kind of adds more credence to them considering it as a business decision, because of course it's going to make a ton of money and be very successful, you know? I mean, look, Paper Mario is getting a remake next year, right? So Thousand Year Door is something they're already doing, and they're classifying that as a remake, not a remaster. They're doing the Mario vs. Donkey Kong thing. They're remastering Luigi's Mansion 2. Super Mario RPG just came out even. I mean, I'm now remembering all these games. The Advance Wars reboot games. Nintendo is not averse to remakes. You know, there's a ton of evidence out there. Metroid games, Zelda games, Advance Wars games. They did a Fire Emblem game on the DS like a couple of years ago. Jeez. They just keep coming to my brain as I talk with you guys. And so, it's like, do the rumors that we're talking about here mean anything? Tough to say. But from a business sense, do we believe it's something Nintendo would consider doing? Yeah, honestly, the more I talk about it, and the more I continue to rattle off examples, the more I believe that Nintendo would almost be silly not to consider it. Now, there's the situation about the Twilight Princess and Wind Waker HD ports. Would we see those games get brought over to the Switch in any way, or to a modern Nintendo console in any way? Definitely, you know, and maybe the ZR thing had something to do with those games and not the Ocarina of Time. It's tough to say, but there's so much on the table for Nintendo to do with redoing and re-releasing old Zelda games and freshening them up that I feel like we'd be silly to ignore the possibilities of any of these games. So it's all very interesting, and it's potentially exciting. You know, like I said near the beginning, as somebody who, as a teenager, just was floored by Ocarina of Time and have loved it for the past 25 years, the idea of Nintendo doing something really special by remaking it in a quality way, again, using some of their examples like Metroid Prime and Link's Awakening and whatnot, or even if they do something that matches the crazy remake quality of something like Final Fantasy VII, I mean, they could really go that far out. They could be really ballsy and do something totally crazy as far as the visual style and even the way it changes up the game from what we originally know. That could also be very exciting. So what if they did something like that? I just think that Nintendo is just as willing to do remakes as anyone else in the industry. This is a trend they are not averse to. So why wouldn't they take one of their most famous and popular games and do a remake? It's not for sure. These rumors and even the no comment thing from Aonuma, I don't know what to think about that. It could be something where it is happening and he's just not ready to talk about it, or it could be something where they're not working on it and he doesn't want to add any fuel to the fire by saying yes or no. And so maybe he's just like washing his hands of the whole conversation by saying no comment. You know, it could be going in any direction, but it's an exciting prospect. Next year is such a weird mystery, and we think the Switch 2 is coming, and we don't know a lot about their games, and Metroid Prime 4 is still a mystery as well. So what if they are doing something crazy and they're making an Ocarina of Time remake for next year? I say bring it on, man. Nothing has happened in 2023. I don't expect a surprise in the next 2 weeks. In the next 2 weeks. I think Nintendo is done with surprises for 2023. So the ZR 2023 thing, let's just not even think about that. But I think it's on the table, so this is what I think. Share what you guys think below. Again, please consider subscribing to the channel to help me cross 25,000 subscribers sometime in the next couple of months. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys on another video.